On Larry King Now, 80s darling Justine Bateman.
So fame is the largest imposed reality I think you can...
And you have a sense of entitlement when you're famous, don't you?
Well, I wouldn't say that as much as the imposed reality is that everyone is reflecting back to you that you can do no wrong. It was just me and two other people, and the two people were having a conversation about me. And I said, you know, I can hear you. And the looks on their faces were that of indignation, that I had been rude to interrupt their conversation because I'm not a person. I wanted the audience to really feel what it felt like to be famous at all the different stages, the life cycle of fame. The beginning, the love, the hate, the equilibrium, the slide, the descent, the without. And so I sort of emotionally time travel with them.
Plus, guilty pleasure.
You really want to know? I am fascinated with before and after pictures. A before and after of somebody who's had like an enormous 25-pound tumor removed, things like that.
All next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. Today's guest is Justine Bateman, who shot to fame in the 1980s for her role as Mallory on Family Ties alongside Michael J. Fox. And now she's written an intimate and personal book about her experience with fame. The book is called Fame, The Hijacking of Reality. It explores our society's fascination with being famous. It'll be available October 2nd. Why'd you write this?
I started writing it because I was thinking about that ephemeral mist or something that comes into a room when a famous person walks in. Everyone, say a restaurant is having lunch and everything's fine, and then a famous person walks in and like a wave, it'll change how everyone is relating to themselves, to each other, and I wanted to explore that, and also I wanted to look at that explosion in around 2000 where fame became a much, much larger component in our society.
How did you handle it?
I just handled it like one would handle a canoe going down roaring rapids. You just try to stay from being taken under the waves. You just go as fast as you can and just deal with it.
What's bad about it?
Well, there's a lot of people-pleasing that is developed. You can, if fame is introduced very early, versus if fame's introduced to somebody like when they're in their 40s, just like anything else that's introduced later like that, it doesn't become as much of a foundational element in their lives. When it's introduced earlier, as a kid or in your teens or your 20s or whatever, it'll become more foundational to your reality. And then when it fades, which it will, unless you're Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or something like that, then whatever has sort of, it's like a garden that sort of grows together, and then you pull out one of the items in the garden, and whatever was attached to it is going to sort of pull out with it. So when the fame starts fading, then whatever your self-esteem, your sense of importance, anything, whatever's grown in with it, you'll feel that tug, and it'll be painful, so you have to start disconnecting it. So that's, a lot of the book is about divesting yourself of it.
When Family Ties started to take off, you knew you'd be famous, right?
Oh no, I knew nothing about fame. I grew up in sort of like pioneers or something. I was born in New York, and then, we lived in different places on our way over to LA. And then my brother decided to get into the business. And just because we had a neighbor, an actor, an adult who was an actor. And then a year later, I got in like as a what the hell kind of thing, and within 4 months, I got two commercials in the pilot for Family Ties. So even when they said the pilot was picked up, society was so different in the 80s than it is now. The public's understanding of television production or film production or anything was far less than it is now. So I was amongst those people that just like, I didn't, when they said the pilot was picked up, I was like, okay, is that good? Everybody's
happy. But when
happy.
it took off, did you know you were being recognized, right?
Oh, certainly, yes. I mean, once the show was on the air and then people started recognize you, yes, and you start doing, the publicity that is sort of expected of you. And then when they started, I guess we were about 2 years into doing Family Ties, when they started that Thursday lineup that became, just unbeatable, which was Cosby, then Family Ties, then Cheers, then I think Night Court, or there might have been something else there, and then maybe Saint Elsewhere, something like that. And then we had 50 to 60 million people watching us every week, and that really was. And then Mike Fox got so popular after Back to the Future, and you really couldn't go out of the house without any people sort of screaming, and it was odd. Michael J. Fox said about your book, "Is fascinating and frightening and a hell of a ride." Are you too close? Yeah, Mike is. I love him. He's fantastic, and yeah, he's quoted a few. I interviewed a number of people for the book too, and he's quoted a number of times in there. Yeah. You call it the hijacking of reality. Yeah. Elaborate. Okay. So someone's reality is made up of what they understand to be real. And not just like this table is solid, though that's debatable, or the sun is hot or something, but really what town you live in, who your family is, what language you speak, what job you have, things like that. So when any one of those things is suddenly removed, somebody passes away who's close to you, or you lose your jobs, and all these are very traumatic. So fame is, I'll first talk about when it's removed. So when fame starts fading away, it happens to such a small subset of people that it's hard for the public to, when somebody starts stumbling in their private life or something like this, and they're sort of on the backside of fame, there's little sympathy for that, because there's a lot of, the public has a lot wrapped up in whether or not you're famous. Love you going up, hate you going down. And also love that you are going down. Love that There's you're something, going and then there I have called the seesaw theory that helps people feel better about their own lives. And the other thing I talk about is real reality versus imposed reality. So imposed reality would be a father telling his daughter that she's unattractive, even though she's not. So she starts buying into this imposed reality because it means she gets to be part of his world. If you reject it, then you're not part of his world. So fame is the largest imposed reality I think you can. And you have a sense of entitlement when you're famous, don't you? Well, I wouldn't say that as much as the imposed reality is that everyone is reflecting back to you that you can do no wrong. And so after a while, you start leaning into that. You start receiving it as a reality because you can't escape it. I talk about the 5 features of reality Meehan and Wood established in the 70s, where if a reality is something that you can't really escape, there's no alternative that's being offered, then it just becomes real. And so you do call for you just get used to the fact that you could get a table. But the trouble is on the backside of the fame, when the fame starts fading, and then you can't get a table, it starts confusing an individual about where they stand in life. When I talked about, the types of realities that people have as foundational. Up next, more with Justine on her wild ride with fame and what she thinks of reality stars. Her new book is called Fame, The Hijacking of Reality. It's in bookstores and online October 2nd. Stay with us. The book is Fame. The guest is Justine Bateman. Of course, it came to you later. So when you got into acting, it wasn't to be famous, or was it? No, actually, fame had never crossed my mind. Acting had never even crossed my mind. So I did not come into it. And on the flip side, directing, which is now something I'm doing, was something I'd wanted to do since I was 19. So when that started opening up for me, I was like, oh my God, yes. I felt like the timing was right. But yeah, the acting and fame, it just, it wasn't on my agenda. I had no idea before. Were you never happy with it? With fame? The acting, I try to keep it separate in the book, but the acting was, very good to me for a long time. That was great. The fame was, I think it's great to be well known amongst the people you want to work with. But to have that high level of, 50 million people watching you every week and people sort of flipping out a bit when you go out, that's I don't know what you can do with that. Though I'll say my brother's been really good at taking the fame he has now, taking those coins and investing them in like long-term work-related things. He's been really smart about that. I was too young and it was too unwieldy for me to do that kind of thing with those coins.
You said in the book that being famous made you feel like you weren't a person?
There's definitely, the public definitely has to reimagine all these people that become famous as not people. Otherwise, there's no way they could talk about them the way they do. I can recall, and I have in the book, being in an elevator once. It was just me and two other people, and the two people were having a conversation about me. And I said, you know, I can hear you. And the looks on their faces were that of great surprise and indignation that I had been rude to interrupt their conversation because I'm not a person, according to that world, you know? So it is, it's an interesting position to be in, yeah.
Now, today's fame is reality television. Famous for being famous.
Yeah.
I mean, other people are famous. Frank Sinatra was famous because he was a hell of a singer.
Yeah.
A pretty good actor.
Yeah, I think it speaks to where the public is right now as far as how great, I think people ask me, how great is the possibility of me being famous? You know, John Doe, what's the possibility of him being famous? So the more reality shows, show contestants that are famous, the better the chances are of this person who has no discernible skills and talents of becoming famous as well. So let's just use like a violinist. Has this incredible skill as a violinist, becomes quite famous. His skill stays here, and then the fame starts fading. His skill is still here. He's still a great violinist. But if somebody does not have a discernible skill or talent or has not developed that, whatever talents they have in their basket, they just go up and become famous. There's nothing foundational. They go up, and then it fades. And then for that fame to fade, it's the equivalent of that violinist talents disappearing, because the only skill or talent you had or that you were manifesting was to become famous. So now once it's dropping, now your skill and talent of becoming famous is in doubt. So foundationally, you have nothing.
You will have a rougher time.
You will have a very horrible time, yeah.
Has your brother read your book?
Has he read it? I don't think he's read it. I talked to him. I was going to do an academic version, and so I had about 17 interviews in preparation for that. And anyway, so I did talk to him at length about it, about the topic.
Was it difficult to write?
It was uncomfortable at times. I didn't plan on it being so uncomfortable for me, because what I do is I take the audience in this, I'm not comparing myself to Michael Herr, but in the same way Michael Herr wrote Dispatches and can make you feel emotionally what it's like to be in war. I wanted the audience to really feel what it felt like to be famous at all the different stages, the life cycle of fame. The beginning, the love, the hate, the equilibrium, the slide, the descent, the without. And so I sort of emotionally time travel with them. Like in my mind.
Stream of conscious?
A lot of that. Yeah, it's a very raw stream of consciousness style, but still, you know, using that framework. And so I didn't expect it to be, once I started, I knew it had to be that style. But once I started it, it brought up a lot of, to go through things like what I processed while I was going through the descent of the fame just dropping away, to go through that again and all the discomfort of adjusting my self-worth, my self-identity, all of these things. Had to go through that again inside, because I wanted to bring up those emotions again for the reader.
After the break, a round of If You Only Knew with author, actor, director Justine Bateman. Stay with us. We're back with Justine Bateman. The book is Fame. You have children. Mm-hmm. Would you like them to be famous?
No.
Good thinking. You like directing, though.
Love directing. Love it, love it. Love writing and directing and
now, directors can become famous. Many do. They're not recognized on the street necessarily.
See, that's good fame. To be famous within the business is perfect.
Are you affected by famous people you meet who have talent?
Oh, for sure. But I do separate, in my mind, and I mentioned this in the book, people whose work I really love. I mean, yeah, there's just something in me like, oh, I so badly want to go up and just say.
So they're famous, right?
They're famous, but they're well known to me because I so like their work. And I have had times, I mentioned in the book, where I've gone up to somebody who's just quite famous, but whose work I don't really like, and done the, oh, I love your work, when I don't. And so I examine that in the book, like, why did I do that? Why did I lurch towards them and say I love your work when I don't? And yeah, it's that fame thing.
Interesting subject.
Very.
We play a little game of If You Only Knew.
Okay.
And you don't have to answer them. What is your secret talent?
I can turn my tongue upside down. Shall I demonstrate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, my.
Now it's no longer a secret.
How did you know you could do that?
That's a good question.
Did you do
More importantly, when did I discover that other people couldn't do that? I thought that was just a normal thing.
No. No other people can do it. Who's a person you would trade places with for a day?
Probably a baby.
Best piece of advice you ever got?
Don't sweat the small.
What's a luxury you can't live without?
I totally have an answer for this. Heated seats in a car.
You like heated seats in a car, except if you turn it on by accident in a hot summer day.
And then you start wondering if something's happening to you physically.
Yeah, and you're catching on fire, yes. What do people get wrong about you?
That I have an IQ that's anywhere near the character I was most known for playing.
Who's someone from history you'd like to take to lunch?
Frida Kahlo.
Strangest job you've ever had?
I haven't had that many jobs that aren't entertainment related. I had some internships when I was a student at UCLA as an adult, but I wouldn't find them, they weren't weird.
Guilty pleasure?
You really want to know? I am fascinated with before and after pictures, surgery before and after pictures, or skin disease photos of, if somebody has like a before and after of somebody who's had like an enormous 25-pound tumor removed, things like that.
You're weird. Okay, you write about a few in your book, but what's the weirdest fan encounter you ever had?
Like weirdest, not dangerous fan encounter I ever had?
There's dangerous?
Oh yeah, well, it's in the book. You have to buy the book to read about it. I'm not going to give it away. So I wouldn't call this weird as much as very unique. There's a woman, and I don't know her name. I think if I Googled it, I could find her name. Very nice woman who I've seen at a couple of events. And she has tattoos on her arm, on both arms of people's autographs. And so she held out her arm at one of the events I was at and asked me to sign it. And I said, oh, okay, and I signed it. And then the next event I saw her at, she had it tattooed. So my signatures, and she's very sweet, and that's just her thing. She has people's autographs tattooed on her arms. That's her.
She could become famous.
Well, if I remembered her name, I could have helped that.
Is there something you believe to be true and realize wasn't?
I'm going to answer that with something a physicist, and I can't remember his name. There was a part of a book that was asking, what do you believe to be true but cannot what do you believe is not true but cannot prove? And he said, or I'm mixing up that question, but he says, I believe but cannot prove that time does not exist. That time is something we just use to organize our reality. And I think I like that a lot.
That's probably true. You can't prove it.
You can't prove that time exists.
It's like faith, right? You can't prove.
You can't prove, but here on both those counts, if you do pretend that time exists, do things feel more organized? Do you like the result of it? And you go, yes, then fine, then believe it. Same thing with faith. If somebody has faith and it makes their life better, then great. Do you have to prove whether or not it's real? No, it's just like an experiment, you know? If you like the result, do it.
Tell me something people don't know about you.
I can't tell you.
You're a little too smart for this program. In our final moments, we'll get to your social media questions for Justine Bateman. The book is Fame, The Hijacking of Reality. I can't wait to get at it, and we'll be right back. We're with Justine Bateman. The book Fame is in stores. You can get it online. Justine Bateman, The Hijacking of Reality is the subtitle. We have some social media questions.
Okay.
Jack Kaufman on Twitter. Why did you leave acting?
Hi, Jack. You're in the title of my book, Hijacking. You know, it's interesting. I don't know if it got tired of me or I got tired of it first. But more generally, it seemed like I was definitely supposed to go in this direction of writing and directing and producing. And I think if the door had not been shut, as hard as it was for me in my mid to late 30s, if that door had not been shut like that, so this is really a big picture answer. I believe that I would not have gone to UCLA and gotten a computer science degree. I would not be going in this direction. I would not be writing and producing and directing. And so I think that it had to happen for me that way in order for me to see where I needed to go.
Prime Pilot on Twitter. Can you share a memorable story or two from your time at Family Ties?
You know, I'm gonna tell that Twitter user to buy the book and check out any stories he might find of interest in here, because it's kind of a long time ago for me to recall anecdotes.
What was Michael like to work with?
Perfect. Loved him. Yeah.
Keep in touch with him?
Yeah.
How's he doing?
He's doing great. Great attitude.
You enjoyed acting, though, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was good at it. Yeah. Which is why when the door sort of shut, it was a bit confounding. And I had to work through that. But then I had already started writing. Missy
Bova, what do you think happened to Mallory? Where do you think Mallory ended up with her life?
If they saw the last episode, that's where Mallory exists in those 7 years. That's it.
Nothing after that.
No. She just keeps reliving all of that in the reruns.
Austin Kelly on Facebook asks, what can people expect from Fame, the book, before reading it? How should people approach this book?
That's a good question. I would say approach it, be prepared to just go in it with me. Just go into the emotional states in the entire emotional life cycle of Fame. Go in it. And by the end, my hope is that people will have a renewed appreciation for their own skills and talents, short of any recognition, short of any followers, short of any fame, of any of that. I mean, I hope, I don't know if it's even possible, but I hope that our country in particular can become less intently focused on fame, getting famous, getting followers. And I think it's really sucking people's worth out of them.
Austin Kelly also asks, any advice for anyone struggling with fame?
Right. So anyone who's struggling to become famous, I would say, put that task down and take a breath. And anyone who's struggling to reclaim their own self-worth and all of this as fame is fading, buy the book, and hopefully some of the processes I went through in it can help them.
I understand you wrote once that you wanted to get your MBA. So that's still something you want to do?
Maybe. I do love business. I love case studies on different businesses. Yeah, maybe.
Thank you, Justine.
Thank you.
Great talking.
So great talking with you.
Big thanks to my guest, Justine Bateman. Make sure to pick up her book, Fame, The Hijacking of Reality. It's in bookstores and online October 2nd. I can't wait to get at it. And you can find me on Twitter at King's Things, and we'll see you next time.